Hello, welcome to the first video in the series Reaching Millennials with the Gospel. I'm so excited you chose to be here. I believe God has prepared wisdom for you and your ministry to be able to bring the great news of our Father's love in a more dynamic way to this generation. Before we get started, I want to help you posture yourself to receive the most out of this particular video. This video is going to be philosophical in nature. We're going to explore how we as church leaders can become more effective at reaching millennials. We want to look at their values, the way they think, the way they operate. And because this is going to be philosophical in nature, this particular video and the concepts revealed in this video are going to resurface more and more throughout the following videos. So this is actually the most important video in the whole series. So the posture you should take is that of a student. Grab something to take notes with. Be prepared to watch this video 3 or 4 times till you become one with these philosophies and they become ingrained in your way you process life and ministry. And then lastly, at the end of this video and all the other videos, there will be reflection questions for you to answer that will help you identify how you're identifying with these concepts, some internal struggles or resistances you may be having, and then help you to posture yourself to take future steps to be able to be more engaged with these concepts as you go forward in ministering to millennials. So with that, let's get started. In this first lesson, we're going to explore the questions: who are the millennials? What are their values? And how did they develop these values? The millennial generation are those that are born between 1980 and 2000. They're the largest generation in U.S. history, boasting over 92 million people. And because of this, I believe that they're the most strategic generation for the church to reach in U.S. history. The impact they are going to make in the world will only be known when we get to heaven. When we observe the last few decades, we can clearly see that the millennials think very differently than Gen Xers and even baby boomers. Why is that? What is going on that has caused this shift? Well, one of the things is that millennials have grown up in a society of rapid change, which has caused them to shift their expectations of life, their priorities of life, and the way they process life. And because of this, I believe that we need, as ministry leaders, a macro societal understanding of our changing culture. When we consider someone who was so effective at bringing the gospel to many different types of people, like the Apostle Paul, we realize that it's not enough for us to teach sound doctrine. It's not enough for us to properly exegete Scripture. It's not enough for even for us to teach good theology. We also have to become students of culture. And Paul gets at this when he begins to say in 1 Corinthians 9:22, I became all things to all men that I might save some. When you consider this statement that I'm willing to become all things to all men like I might save some, you have to question whether this person is being idealist or if he really, really means it. When we look at the declaration Paul makes in Romans 15, we realize that he wasn't just being an idealist, he was someone that really meant what he said. He practiced what he preached. In Romans 15, he says that from Jerusalem or roundabout to Illyricum, which is about a 1,400-mile missionary journey, he fulfilled his ministry of the gospel of Jesus Christ. When you consider that in that 1,400-mile missionary journey that he preached to Macedonians, Asians, Grecians, he covered so many types of people, encountered so many different worldviews, so many philosophies of life, and yet he had the ability at the end of it to say, I fulfilled the ministry of the gospel of Jesus Christ. I want us to be able to say the same thing when we see our Father in heaven. That as we approach the millennial generation, which has a very different philosophy maybe than you or those who are in your congregation, that we can say, we love them so much to become a part of them, that we might save them, and that we fulfilled our ministry of the gospel of Jesus Christ to this generation. As you can tell, I'm excited about this. So now what we're going to do is we're going to look at 3 things to help you as a student of this culture. Number 1, we're going to observe the worldview of millennials. In particular, the shift that's gone on in the Western culture from modernism to postmodernism. Number 2, we're going to look at the values by which they govern themselves. And then number 3, in light of the worldview and the ways they govern themselves through their values, we want to answer the question, how are they now approaching matters of faith, spirituality, and religion? First, let's begin by looking at a worldview many millennials may hold. And before I get too far into worldview, I want to say one thing. Everybody has a worldview, but not everybody's aware of their worldview. A worldview is kind of like wearing rose-colored glasses. And when you look through those glasses and those lenses, everything you see is rose-colored. But the viewer may not even be aware that the glasses are on their face after a while. That's what a worldview is like. Many times we are unaware of our worldview and the way it's interpreting the world around us. So much so that we regard our worldview and our interpretations of the world as truth. So as we start to look at other people's worldview, it will be easy to judge our worldview as being true and theirs as being untrue. Our worldview may be modern, their worldview may be postmodern. And I want to say, as a pastor, as a ministry leader that cares about reaching this generation with the gospel, I want to ask you to lay down your judgments of another person's worldview and enter in saying, what can I learn about the way they're processing the world versus that their way they're processing the world is correct or incorrect? And some of you may be thinking, what is a worldview anyway? A worldview is basically that person's philosophy of life. It's their conception of the way life operates. And it influences the way they process circumstances, decisions that they make, and ultimately what they pursue, their truth. Over the last 100 years, Western culture has experienced a shift in worldview, from modernism to postmodernism. Let me draw a table for you that contrasts modernism to postmodernism and unveil how postmodernism developed as a reaction to modernism. First question, what do moderns believe about truth? Moderns believe truth exists. It can be known. And that truth is found in one singular reality. What do postmoderns believe about truth? Postmoderns believe that truth is ambiguous. It may exist, it may not exist. If it does exist, it's relative at best because it comes from multiple realities. It is informed by the perspectives of many different people. Number two, how do moderns arrive at truth? Moderns arrive at truth through rationalism and empiricism. Rationalism specifically is talking about what are the innate abilities within the human faculties to process or reason about life. And specifically, modernism really was shaped by deductive reasoning, being able to logically prove the realities of a thing. Empiricism. Empiricism speaks to what can be known by the five senses. So what is true for a modern is what it can be perceived and received by the five senses. If it can't be seen, heard, felt, touched, or tasted, smelled even, we don't really believe that it is true. Postmoderns, how do they arrive at truth? Postmoderns arrive at the truth a different route. Postmoderns arrive by social constructs, a person's gender, ethnicity, a person's culture, a subculture. All the influences and people groups that they're a part of begin to shape and influence their reality. Therefore, if my background and experiences are different than your background and experiences, who am I to say that mine is true and yours isn't? They are just different perspectives, multiple realities. And so a postmodern says truth is actually ambiguous and relative. Thirdly, the question is, what motivates a modern to pursue truth? Well, if a modern believes that truth can be known and the way you get to that truth is by studying and observing and looking for facts, then what motivates them is actually the mastery of truth, the mastery of concepts and knowledge. And this leads to domination of that singular reality. Postmoderns. What motivates postmoderns in their pursuit of truth? If moderns were characterized by mastery, postmoderns are actually characterized by process. They believe truth is relative and ambiguous, and that there are multiple realities of what truth really is, multiple perspectives of what truth is. So because we may never arrive to one singular truth or reality, the end goal is not mastery or arriving to a conclusion. The goal is actually delighting in the process, enjoying the journey of discovering more and more of these multiple realities. Fourthly, what is the approach to life in light of their worldview? Moderns who believe that truth can be known and mastered have a clear ethic. They have a clear moral standard. The questions of what is right, what is wrong, how do we define good or evil are easily answered by their mastery of truth. Postmoderns, on the other hand, they believe truth is ambiguous, relative. They delight in the process of gathering more and more truths. They have no clear moral standard. Their morality is relative because it is influenced by the different social constructs and what their opinion of what is moral, what is good, what is right, what is wrong, what is evil. We've just looked at the differences between modernism and postmodernism, and now I want us to explore a question. What has led to the postmodern reaction to modernism? Number one, modernism presumes that there is a meta-narrative, one singular truth that can be found, and there's a story of who we are as people, where we're going as a people, and what life's all about. The postmodern assertion is that there are multiple realities. So if there are multiple realities, the only way I can find out what truth really is to dibble and dabble in all of those different realities and get different perspectives of life and what life is all about. If you restrict my free will to pursue these other multiple realities, then you're restricting my journey to be able to find what truth it really is. Number two, the increased access to other worlds and other cultures, values, beliefs, and worldviews. With the invention of the internet and things like smartphones, I'm able to press a button on my phone and be right in Kenya in a moment's notice. I know the worldviews of the Kenyans. I know the religion of the Kenyans. I know what they like to eat. I know the existential questions they're asking. And I begin to ask myself, how does this shape my view of life? Now do that times thousands of cultures, thousands of religions and worldviews, and the postmodern is saying, wow, how could there only be one truth? Number three, millennials have discerned the link that is between a modern's mastery of a concept and the tendency of many moderns to take that concept and want to impose it on other peoples, other groups with other worldviews. And they see it actually as domination. And if we're honest with our history, it has led to much oppression, much injustice, and the division of humanity. Moderns see this in politics, in religion, in economics, and they don't like it. Number four, with being exposed to the ills of modernism and now being introduced to what's called the pragmatist movement, they're now asking the question, does this truth work? They're no longer concerned with the reasonableness, the rationality only as being sufficient for a truth. They're begging the question, does this truth work? This could be illustrated when I was hanging out with one of my friends in college. I wanted to share Jesus Christ with her. And as I was sharing with Jesus Christ with her, she stopped everything and said, James, I don't want to hear about that. I don't want to hear about, is Jesus real or not? Look at your life and you tell me what has happened in your life. Does he work? And the way you feel by that question is how I felt. I was taken aback. I began to befuddle my words, and I had no clue how to answer her. But this is the question this generation is asking. In observing our world over the last 70 years and the atrocities that have taken place, the injustices that are still prevalent today, postmoderns have had a reaction to the modern assertion that we can actually master reality and that we can have science and education alone fix our world's problems, that we are reasonable beings, and so we are morally good. The postmodern reaction has been that they are now suspicious of authoritative claims. They are now suspicious of grand meta-narratives. And they will actually say that our pursuit to master concepts has led to our pursuit to master people. We've imposed our worldviews, the concepts that we've mastered, onto other people's, other ethnicities, other cultures, and the way they perceive life, and they don't like it. So what postmoderns delight in is not the mastery of a concept, concluding what truth is, or dominating this reality. They actually delight in the process of coming to truth. They saw how the claims of what truth is and the ways to fix society didn't work in modernism. And they're reacting against it, saying, there may be truth, that's good. It may look as many different forms. We're okay with that. But for us, it's about the journey, it's about the process of discovering it. And if we do bump into it, we'll just keep it to ourselves so we don't dominate others with it. So at this point, you're probably wondering, who is this guy and why should I be listening to him anyway? Well, I'm a millennial, and I've been a missionary to millennials for the last 13 years on university campuses all around this world. And I would like to bring you into some of the insights that I've gained in doing so. Before that, I also grew up in a Christian home, a strong, Bible-believing, Jesus is Lord kind of church, an evangelical church. And at 15 years old, I remember going to class and we practiced Buddhist meditations in this one particular class on this particular day. And I remember experiencing a lot of peace to the point that I fell asleep. And I went to my youth pastor afterwards and said, I wonder if it's possible to kind of mix what we learned in Buddhism with Jesus. Like, I felt really peaceful during the meditation and, the truth about Jesus saving us for our sins. The combo of these two things could be really, really great. This was an example of the way a millennial would think. Though I heard the truth that Jesus is Lord, the syncretistic nature of my generation was ingrained in me. And I didn't see anything wrong with exploring a little bit of Buddha and a little bit of Jesus at the same time. This is one of the manifestations of postmodernism. I was searching out multiple realities, and I didn't even really know it. Another thing that I began to see as I've been on campus serving students is that the worth of humanity has significantly been diminished in this postmodern worldview. For example, I remember two particular situations. One, I was talking with a young student who was raised by his grandmother in a not very good neighborhood, and I was trying to explain to this student the concept of sin. In explaining this concept, I used an analogy. What happens if, someone would break into your grandmother's house and they would, rob her, assault her, and just be extremely nasty towards her? How would that make you feel as a person? He said, well, I'd be kind of indifferent. When he said this, I was taken aback. So I pressed in a little bit more. I said, okay, let me rephrase this. The grandmother who is basically your mother, who raised you and who gave her everything for you to live and have this education, what happens if someone breaks in and they assault your grandmother? Would you not say that was right or wrong? Would you not have a judgment? He said, no, I actually can't say if that is right or wrong. It's whatever that person wants to do. And he meant it. The first time I was exposed to this, I thought it was just a fluke. So now in another context, back in my neighborhood in an inner city of Chicago, I began to ask this question to a student, I began to ask a young person who was in a gang some similar concepts that got at human worth. And I said, this is your sister that's standing next to you. And to explain what sin is and what Jesus came to save us from, what would happen if a rival gang member came up to your sister and assaulted her and did all kinds of horrible things to her? Would you not say that was wrong? And this gang member looked me in the eyes. He was about 18 years old, and he said, no, it's not wrong. He's doing what he has to do. He's doing what he thinks is right. This was now the second confirmation that I received, and I began to understand that not only has postmodernism moved away from modernism and philosophy, but what is happening is that there is a clouding of morality. There's a diminishing of the human worth. And then the last example I'll give you is Many of you all may know Ray Comfort, who's an evangelist of Living Waters Ministries, does amazing ministry. We respect them so much and are appreciative for their ministry. And actually, they helped us get started with their teachings. But I remember Ray being on a university campus doing a study on evolution versus God. And in this study, he was trying to prove the reality of God through conversation and dialogue. And as Ray had this conversation, he had one question. He said, if you had to save your neighbor or your dog from drowning, who would you save? And many of the respondents who are of postmodern thought said they would save their dog over the human. And then Ray asked, why? Why would you do this? He said, well, I don't really know my neighbor, and I know my dog, and I love my dog. And then Ray would say, well, do you believe that your dog is worth more than a human life, a human soul? And the answer was yes. These are some of the things that we've experienced in ministering to postmoderns that I want to bring you in light to try to illustrate this shift from modernity to postmodernity. It is a shift from one singular reality to multiple realities. It is a shift from clearly defined morality to a relativistic morality. And all this has implications on how we share the gospel, which we'll get into in the later videos. Hey, I hope you enjoyed this first lesson. This is just a peek as to what you're going to get. When I think about what sets this curriculum apart from the other books that are out there on reaching millennials or on postmodernism, is that this curriculum is really the complete package. It's talking about how do you take someone who is completely lost and bring them through a process to actually receiving Jesus, becoming a disciple, and developing them into a leader in your church. Now, what I want to introduce you is that in these next couple of lessons, we're going to start to look at how can you evangelize a millennial in a way that fits this context today. What are some shifts you can make in your preaching to better connect with them as an audience? And then we want to look at some creative ways you can design a discipleship experience that is conducive with their values and makes them want to stay in your church longer term versus leaving. Or even for other millennials that are looking for a church home because they're dissatisfied with theirs, they can find a home in yours. So again, this is a complete curriculum taking them from 0 all the way to a positive 10 in following Jesus, and we believe it's going to benefit you. So if you'd like to check out the curriculum and purchase it, you can go to www.afaiththatOverflows.com/store. I look forward to continuing this journey with you and your church.